March 26th, 1940. Over 330,000 British and Allied troops were stranded on the beach outside the French city of Dunkirk. Out of effective ammunition, they had retreated. The ships of the British Navy could not come in to get them because the waters were too shallow. And the German army was advancing. These men, these many, many brave men, are going to be butchered. And the British Empire, with all its might, is waiting. What can they do? Finally, the call came to civilians. And by the hundreds, boat owners, ship owners, pleasure craft owners, little boats, little ships, made their way across the channel. They were able to get to those shallow waters and retrieve those men and take them out to the safety of the larger ships. There were some who considered it a defeat for the British because of the retreat. But it was an opportunity for Winston Churchill to rally the entire nation and be able to say, the British people do not abandon their own. We come together when we're needed. And what had become almost a hopeless situation was actually a rescue mission. I'd like you to go back several centuries, long before the Dunkirk rescue, and think about another rescue mission. Jesus in the upper room is with his disciples, and he prays after he's been talking to them. We looked at that the last 2 weeks. And Jesus prays. And he prays aloud. This has been called the high priestly prayer of Jesus. And in this prayer, we get an insight into what's going through his mind as the cross is looming. In this prayer, he prays first for himself. And then he prays for the 11 men who were gathered around him. And then he prays for us. When Jesus comes to prayer, he doesn't come the way we do, knowing that God is so much superior to us, and we come as children to someone much greater. Jesus comes to his Father as an equal. He's not coming wondering if God is going to answer this prayer. He's coming as an equal to express the wonder of their relationship and the wonder that's about to take place because of that relationship. He wasn't asking any favors of God. He was just sharing with God and talking about what he was so looking forward to. And he said he longed to re-experience the glory he had shared with the Father before the world began. But the only way there, the only way to get to that glory again, was by way of the cross. You see, long before there was a world, long before any of the people that we have known were part of this planet, the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, in their perfect relationship, decided that when these people that God was going to make fell, He was going to mount a rescue mission. Michael Card has a line in a song that captures some of what's happening here. Could it be that you would really rather die than live without us? God doesn't need us. But the joy and the wonder of the relationship within that Trinity was so overwhelming. God simply wanted to share it. And so He made those first people. And of course, they turned their backs on Him, decided to do it their own way. And knowing that this rescue mission was absolutely essential, because God couldn't just say, "That's okay, it's not a problem." There had to be a way to bring back these people He longed to be in relationship with. And the way became Himself. And so the cross became the only way for Jesus to return to the glory, taking us with Him. Have you ever found yourself thinking, "I wish it could be the way it used to be"? You know, back when I could do the things I can't do anymore. Back before the cancer, back before the divorce, back before that experience that just turned life completely upside. I wish I could go back. Jesus may have been tempted to think that very thing. I wish I could go back to the glory I had with the Father. But the only way to re-experience that was forward through the cross, so that we could go with Him. So we can't go back to the way it used to be. Number one, because we're not the people we were back then. Number two, because God's got something so much more wondrous, that to go back to that would be to settle for something less. And so what He prayed for Himself was to re-experience that glory, but to do it with all these for whom He would die. He would rather die than live without us. Can you imagine that? Then He prayed for the men who were around Him, those 11. He could have prayed a host of things for them. He prayed two things for them. Number one, that they would be protected from the evil one. Protected from the evil one. Not protected from trouble, but protected from Satan's onslaughts that would make them doubt Him, that would tear them apart. Those kinds of things that Satan delights in. The physical difficulties and the emotional difficulties, those are just tools that Satan uses to accomplish the worst thing, which is coming between us and Jesus. He prayed they would be protected from that, but also that they would be sanctified It doesn't mean they suddenly become perfect, nor does it mean that they walk around with little halos over their heads. It means that they are set apart for God's purposes and not their own. God's purposes are this rescue mission. Lord, Father, Jesus said, sanctify them, set them apart for your purposes. Don't let them get all caught up in things of their own. Remind them that the reason they're on this planet is to continue the mission that I started. Sanctify them. Help them live those kinds of lives that reflect our character. And when they do, people are not going to like it much. And they'll be mocked and they'll be hated. One of the things for which we need to be careful in this very issue is that we think we're somehow being persecuted because of Jesus, that we're being talked about because of Jesus, that people are being rude to us because of Jesus. Hopefully that's the case, but let's be careful that people are not becoming critical of us because of our hypocrisy or our arrogance. Nobody talks to me like that. That thinking should never be part of our lives. Jesus told these 11 men, "By this will all men know that you are my disciples, if you love each other." And his character of love would spill out from them to people around, and people would figure out, why in the world are they being kind? Why in the world are they being decent? It's because Jesus lives inside, and that's part of our mission, to be him to a world. That process of sanctifying us, making us more like Jesus, so that we can look like Jesus to the world, can take us to some very, very difficult places in our own lives. We're not there yet, but he's in the process. And then Jesus prayed for you. Jesus prayed for you. The night that he prayed in the upper room, I don't know if in his humanity he had access to the names and faces and life experiences of all the people who would ever come to him. I don't know. But I do know at that point, he prayed for you. And do you know what he prayed? He prayed that you would get along with the people in this place so well that people outside the church will look here and say, "Oh my goodness, God must be among you." Wait a minute, I don't see that in this verse. Jesus prayed this about us. May they be brought to complete unity, to let the world know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. We're going to disagree with each other. Sometimes we're not going to like what we do to each other. And there are times we have to ask forgiveness. And there are times we have to humble ourselves a bit and recognize that what I've been doing has not been good. But we dare not stop loving each other. Okay, we don't do the Catholic thing or the Lutheran thing or the Presbyterian thing, because we're not Catholics or Lutherans or Presbyterians. We are ECs. That doesn't make us better. That makes us different. And it's important for us to be faithful to what the Father has shown us, the traditions that we believe are true, not because they're traditions, but because they're true. And we do this together in such a way that people will look at us and say, you know, sometimes those ECs get a little carried away and sometimes they really mess up. But you know what? They really do love each other. Something good is going on there. The reason Jesus told us to do this is because that rescue mission that He initiated, that made it possible for us to come to God, He gave us. I don't know who you're going to bump into this week that is part of your rescue opportunity. But it's exactly what Jesus has given us each other for. Ernest Shackleton led an expedition in 1914 to reach Antarctica. A year later, a lesser-known Canadian-led expedition headed the other direction to explore the North Pole. Both those ships found themselves trapped in ice. Keep in mind, these are wooden ships, long before the kind of technology we have today. Each crew was facing a fight for survival, but the outcomes of those two were entirely different. In the north, members of a crew led by Captain Stephenson degenerated into a band of selfish, mean-spirited, cutthroat individualists, ending in the death of all 11 crew members. In the south, Shackleton's crew had exactly the same problems: the cold, the food shortages, the stress, the anxiety. But his crew responded with teamwork, with self-sacrifice, and astonishing good cheer. Both those leaders stayed true to their core principles. Captain Stephenson was determined to get the job done no matter what it cost his people. Ernest Shackleton has become a legend because he put his men's need first. At one of the lowest points in the trip, he wrote, "The task is now to secure the safety of the party." He gave some of the men his own mittens and boots, and he took the longest watches in the night. By valuing each person, he forged a team that was willing to sacrifice for each other and help each other keep going. And because of what he did, his entire crew survived, made it back to civilization. Ernest Shackleton did for his crew what Jesus does for us every single day. Had you seen that the giant in Lebanon is no longer 24 hours? They cut back and they're closed between midnight and 6. So if for some reason you absolutely positively have to have a gallon of milk at 3 in the morning, you can't get it at Giant anymore. Jesus, on the other hand, does not ever close shop because he needs a break, because he can't find people to cover for him. He never does that. Hebrews tells us that he is 24/7 interceding for us. And what he intercedes for is that we can be one. He intercedes for your growth in him, for your understanding of his forgiveness, for strength for the task. He intercedes for everything that we need. But the thing he told us he prays for in the upper room is that we would be one so that we can be part of his rescue mission. We've said this before, and it's still absolutely true. Will you take just a few seconds to look at the people around you? Go ahead and do that right now. They're nice enough people. Yeah, but you don't know what I know, Pastor. And Jesus says to you, that's the very time you bring that person to me. And between us, we will find a way to keep this body one. So that the world will know that the Father sent Jesus. Do the people in your life day to day know that you love them enough to help them come to know the one who is sent to rescue? Pray with me.